Horror Lies.
Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you. I'm your Wednesday evening host here at BodyBags. It is week 394. It is random week, and so I bring you, as you can see, the final installment of what I consider to be, man, a really, really fun franchise, and that is compliments of Amondo de Ossorio, and of course we are talking specifically Night of the Seagulls, which is the fourth piece, and this is from 1975, but the fourth piece in his franchise. And of course we begin, well, this is the, let's just start here, the Scream Factory release on Blue, of course, and I have to say, not a ton of extras, but the one reason, man, if you're into this franchise at all, and you do not own the Scream Factory release of this specific movie, but maybe you have the coffin set, and so you're like, there's no need to get it. Well, yeah, I'll give you one reason. The Nashi cast has their commentary track on this, and it is freaking fantastic. And if you've never heard the Nashi cast, they cover specifically Spanish horror, much that revolves around Paul Nashi, but man, they covered, just as a podcast, the first three installments of this franchise, and but they were blessed with the opportunity to provide the commentary track for Scream Factory. And so if you do not own this, but you have the coffin set, there's your reason to pick this up. It is worth it just to have that, the amount of history and talk, and not just on Seagulls, but the entire franchise. They kind of poke and prod around it. This franchise goes way back to its origins. I want to say 71, but I mean origins in terms of from 1861, the short story Mountain of the Souls that influenced Ossorio heavily, and probably coming out from underneath the dictator Franco. His regime was coming to an end by 75, but by 71, Spain was already sort of flexing their creative muscles when it came to film and the things that they were beginning to do on film. And so Ossorio really does become a vital piece to the early beginnings and boom of the horror industry in Spain. But the guy who really put him on the map was probably Paul Nashi and the things that he did. So, just from a historical point of view in terms of art and cinema, this franchise is extremely important to the cultural fabric of Spain in terms of its comment on what the last decades were like living under this regime. And so there's a lot to sort of wade into, a lot to give you thought of, the things that Ossorio touches upon. There's just a lot there to think about. But I had to piecemeal this thing. I wasn't fortunate enough to get that coffin set when it was available. So I got the first three on from Blue Underground, right? Yeah, Blue Underground, the first three. Picked these all up basically at the same time. Saw them all on Amazon floating there. One, I paid probably a little more than I should have, but I wanted the three, and then I picked up the Scream Factory of the last installment. So I know that's not ideally how we want to do things. Ideally would be the coffin set, but I don't have the coffin set, so it is what it is. But I do have the Nashi commentary track, the Nashi cast commentary track, which is so worth it. But so let's talk about the movie for a minute, and maybe I'll just kind of say a few things. Being that the podcast I was part of is a few weeks removed now, I've had time to kind of think things over, and I didn't want to do this as a review that close to the pod. I want to take a break and then even revisit it again. And I have to say right off the top, it is the fourth installment, the fourth piece, and it is my favorite. I think it's the most polished of the four, but as was mentioned, or I've heard mentioned, of course, this of the four maybe doesn't have as much of the earlier vibe that you get accustomed to, and maybe some of that is because Ossorio decided to, that he was going to be influenced by H.P. Lovecraft, and specifically The Shadow over Innsmouth, in terms of bringing this installment to life. But if you don't know much about this franchise, the four films are really separate of one another. And in Europe, as Ossorio mentions or has said, continuity between films in any given franchise just isn't important like it is here. You don't really look for that kind of continuity. You just get good stories. And if there's one of the four that sort of falls by the wayside, or at least in some people's estimates, the weakest entry probably is the Ghost Galleon. That was probably the one most hard hit by budgetary constraints. But it's still a fun ride, and he did something different. He put the Knight Templars onto the ship, a ghost ship, and maybe I should just start right there. The Knights Templars are the star of all four movies. And what you get is basically a new monster creation, sort of a combination of a mummy vampire, and they have been at rest, and then someone comes along, disturbs the ground, and they come up to fulfill some semblance of prophecy or fate or doom to those who would do such a thing. But in the fourth one, the one that most resembles a Lovecraftian vibe, it takes place near the seashore. Basically, you've got this seaside village that is basically sold out and sold to the devil, per se, in order to keep the Knights Templar happy. Basically, once a year for 7 straight nights, they offer a virgin as a sacrifice. The Knights Templar come down, grab their virgin as a means of maintaining their eternal life, per se. And so this town has basically been subjugated by the Knights Templar for centuries. And so when you get basically a new doctor and his wife move into this village, replacing the older doctor who's basically said enough's enough, I'm out of here, they realize real quick that they're in a really weird town that's got a lot of things hidden in the closet. And as things start to come out before them and be made known to them, they try to intervene in this ceremonial process, which the town sort of resists and fights against, because if they don't offer up their virgin, well, then the Knights Templar will literally raze their village to the ground. But this doctor and his wife, they're not afraid, and so they do intervene, because a lot of this they don't really understand the fullness of the trouble they're in until the very end. And I'll just kind of leave the end by itself. It does have, I think, I don't know. I've heard some people say the end in this one's a little bit of a cheap way out. I don't know. I enjoy it. I enjoy this whole movie. I think, like I said, I think it's the most polished film as far as continuity across all four films. The only one really you've had for all four is the composer. So the music thematically brings some continuity. The Knights Templar, even though they're sort of poked and some things, are here in these two films with regards to what they can and can't do, they're not over here. So he sort of just has fun with his own creation over the span of 4 films in a very short 4 or 5 year time period, which I've heard him say, because he worked in radio for the government of Spain, bringing like famous or stage plays to the radio, I think it was. He only had 4 weeks of vacation, so within time frame of 4 weeks, that's all he had to shoot these films. And so, I mean, there's just a remarkableness that comes to just the process and what he was able to create, and the social comment that he was able to make with regards to Franco and the absolutely terrible regime that these poor people had to live under. And so there's a lot of metaphors and symbolisms used throughout, which, you got to just dig into it and have fun with it, and poke and prod and listen to good things like the Nashi cast as they comment on these things. And so, I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, again, I love the ambiance. I think the Seagulls bring an added vibe to it, which is interesting, because in the first film, you have a scene in the mortuary where, I think it's a mortuary where the autopsies and stuff, or the dead people are being taken into the area of this hospital. Anyways, you got the mortician who's he's got a bird in a cage, and the bird is just absolutely freaking out prior to a very famous recitation of one of the main girls coming back to life, which is the only time you see anything like that in any of the movies. But anyway, the bird is going absolutely havoc, and I find it interesting that you'll see that same theme with the Seagulls in this movie. And so our hero who is one Dr. Henry Stein and his wife, will again basically meddle in the town's affairs, disrupt it, and make allowance for a very sort of not so fun ending, but a different type of ending than the other films. So it is very enjoyable. And the Scream Factory, I mean, it looks good. There is the whole day to night shooting, which creates some of its own minor issues and problems. I think the transfer over on the Scream Factory is pretty good. I just enjoy it, man. I enjoy this entire franchise. I found it an absolute complete honor that Will Carner would have allowed me to be on that podcast talking about this franchise, and this is a franchise that is, as I said, grown very near and dear to my heart. The more I hear about the history of his inspirations, Ossorio's inspirations, and what he was trying to say, it just becomes ever more important to me in terms of its cultural impact for the people of Spain and decades ago. So anyways, Night of the Seagulls. I think I'll just end it there and leave it at that. But I highly suggest this specific release, at least for this one. Even if you have the coffin set, this is worth picking up just for the Nashi cast pod or commentary track. It is well worth it. And some of the extras, just some minor little ones that are pretty funny, pretty hilarious to take a look at. So anyways, Amondo de Ossorio for week 394. It is random week, and I thought I would just spend a minute or two throwing out some thoughts on a franchise that is very near and dear to my heart. As always, we end these things off with Go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not a dream.